Hello guys, Altitude and Trails podcast number 13, and today we're gonna talk about photography with Kristian. Kristian, for the Instagram followers, Ulberg. That's an amazing profile, guys. And the photography, okay, I'm not gonna say nothing for the moment because we're gonna discover this amazing photographer together. And hello. Hi, Kristian.
Hi.
How are you?
What an introduction.
Come on, I didn't say anything. So, Kristian, we're gonna just have a little introduction. Let's tell us who is Kristian Ulberg. I love that profile name on your Instagram profile.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I can maybe explain a bit where the name comes from because it might be a bit cryptic, but my name is Kristian. I grew up in Norway and I studied in the UK, and my parents, my mum is Swedish and my dad is Danish, so I would say that, you know, I'm pretty Scandinavian in my upbringing. I spent a lot of time in both Denmark, Sweden and Norway, and with studying in the UK and also abroad in the Netherlands. I've sort of been a lot of places. At the moment I live in Sweden, in Stockholm. I'm trained as an architect, and I would say that's my way into photography as well, because, you know, through doing a creative study, you meet people who do different creative things like photography or painting or any other, like dancing, for example, and that's my way into. So architectural photography, I guess. And in terms of hunting, I've hunted in a lot of different places: Norway, Sweden, Denmark, obviously the UK, and I've been to New Zealand a few years ago, which was a lot of fun. So I've seen lots of different hunting cultures and lots of different ways of doing things, and I think that's what I try and document with my photography, is trying to put people into a context, both the local, you know, how you do things where you hunt locally, and putting people into the context of nature. And like I said, I work as an architect, and on the side, like you mentioned, I have my Instagram page Ulberg, and I also write a blog that's ulberg.co, where I try and graphically explain tips and tricks for hunters, and through writing to try and reach a broad community with some advice that I hopefully can give.
Cool.
So
cool.
Yeah.
So actually, if we want to focus on a precise moment, when did you start photography? It was with your work, with your studies in architecture, or was before? I mean, was connected, or was totally before starting the architecture studies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's some background on that. I always really looked up to my cousin, my older cousin, 5 years older. He's an art director, graphic designer, and he used to always have a Canon camera when I grew up. So because he had one, I always wanted a Canon camera, and I think I got one when I was like 17 or 18. Got a camera, you know, a 600D or whatever it was, with a kit lens. And it just started to go out and take photos because, you know, try and use it and see what you can achieve with it. But I think it's sort of, you go out and you try and shoot without any purpose, and I think the end result is that you get a bit disappointed if you're not really thinking about what you're doing. So I had the camera, used it through my studies, you know, to document, to photograph models and other things, you know, on field trips we went on, and it didn't really progress anywhere until I started my master's degree, where two of my peers, an Italian guy actually and another guy from Sweden that I met in the Netherlands, they showed me what you can achieve with basically the same equipment that I had, and one of them, the Italian guy, he was focusing a lot on iPhone photography, and I really was impressed with how he documented, you know, the photos that he took. And I thought, I mean, I used to blame the equipment, that the equipment isn't good enough. I've sort of reached my limit with this, and so I'm not going to chase it any further. But he showed that you can get a long way with iPhone and take really interesting photos. And it sort of comes back to composition and how you how you think about what you want the photo to convey, the limitations of it, and also the editing. And I sort of, at that point, I sort of realized that, can you really do this with a phone? And started taking more and more photos with a phone, started to taking more photos with purpose, of thinking, what do I want to take a photo of? You know, copying other people's works, or trying to align things and doing photos the way that they did it, to challenge myself and see, can I achieve this? And yes, I could. And sort of segueing into hunting photography, I think what I saw on Instagram when I started looking into it was, I thought there was a lot of focus on trophy shots, a lot of focus. And I mean, there is a time and place for trophy shots, but I think that there's more to hunting than that. And that's sort of where my name, or my Instagram handle comes in, because that's the Norse god of hunting, and berg is an abbreviation of my last name, or my last name means berg, or mountain in Danish, in a Danish dialect. So it sort of made sense to take those two names and put them together into a portmanteau. And I think my way into it was that I think that there's something deeply spiritual to hunting, that you're trying to really immerse yourself with nature in a way that you don't really do in many other activities. So if you go hiking, you're always you're not trying to be apart with nature, you're trying to sort of observe it from a distance. And if you wherever you live, even if you live in a house, you still live in a synthetic environment that's been built up by humans. Whereas when you're hunting, of course, you're still human, and you're still sort of creating your own environment with, the gear you use and how you're trying to overcome nature. But it's a much more, I think it's one of the more, connecting activities you can do in terms of in nature, and trying to be as close to nature as possible. Yeah.
And actually, you just answered to my second question that I wanted to ask you, was to describe, asking you if it was possible to describe your first steps in photography. And then what I understand right now is that you wanted to say something. You had a message that, looking at those photographies of trophies on social, and that push you to trying to create a different message. I mean, to try to show what is your interaction with nature. And that's an interesting thing, because it's an approach of photography that, sometimes it looks like, and taking pictures, but if the photography is a sterile tool, like is a sterile creation, I mean, it's not giving anything to the viewers. But when there is a message behind, and actually you had that thing just since the beginning, if I understand well, I mean.
Yeah, I guess, I've sort of, the photos I started posting on social media, they were all taken with my phone, and I sort of had a back catalogue of, moments that I thought, oh wow, this is something that I want to capture and try and convey, to myself, but then evolved into, social media. And I think, the message is that, humans interact with nature in a different way when you're out hunting, and it's so more multifaceted than just that one image that you see of someone sitting next to a dead animal. It's so much more than that, because that's a tiny part of it. And I think that through my training, you get taught to analyze situations, so you get taught to think through, what are you actually trying to say? Why are you doing this? Why does your design or your building or whatever you're doing, why does it look like this? So you sort of have to always analyze yourself and think about, what am I trying to convey with what I'm doing? And that really spills into photography, in the sense that you can think about, if you're out hunting, for example, and you're thinking, oh, this is a really nice moment for me, then the question is, how can I convey this for others? How can I convey this to others? How can I convey this feeling? And it's hard to describe how you do it, but it's hard. It's a process that a lot of people don't, or a process that a lot of people would benefit from, is to think, how can I convey this? Like, just take a step back and say, how can I communicate this moment that I'm feeling right now? sort of, if you want to get a bit spiritual and philosophical, it's called phenomenology, you know, where what you're feeling in the moment, how you're conveying that. And I mean, the starting point, I guess, was that trying to pick up these little moments that I had, that I found myself in when I was hunting. And I didn't really share them with anyone, you know, I showed my dad and some of my friends and stuff, but I think that once you are starting to have some ideas about hunting, that, oh, this is, I can actually get this message across that I'm trying to tell. It gets easier to convey it if you analyze it yourself, and I think that's a good starting point to get into it.
But after all, what do you think about inspiration, especially because we're still talking about how do you approach photography? And do you think inspiration plays a big role into any individual evolution, if it's in terms of photography?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it can come from anywhere, really. I think one thing that is really inspiring to me is obviously, you know, architectural photography, but if you look at it from another perspective, is actually film. So I'm really inspired by Wes Anderson, and he's very good at, you know, putting people into a context that's not that you don't normally see. So for example, you're trying to, you know, he uses a lot of flat perspectives and puts cameras in sort of off angles, so it's not just always from your eye and it's people looking at each other. It's sort of positioning it in a different way and composing his shots and the scenes the way that he wants to convey, as a stylistic move. But I think it's very effective because it helps you remember the scenes and remember the situations that he's putting in through his filmmaking. And I mean, through architecture, you get one thing that you really get taught to do is to put things into context. And I think that's if you look at hunting photography, that's another thing that is important, that you have to, if you show whatever you show, you have to, or whatever you want to take a photo of, you have to put it in some kind of or think about what's the context around this. So for example, if you want to, I try to focus a lot on people, you know, how people interact with nature and putting people into a natural context. And a good way of doing that is to, for example, anchor things into the ground. So always including feet, for example, so that it looks like people are standing on the ground, so that they sort of land somewhere. You know, to try and make your photos interactive and sort of think about how the positioning of angles, etc.
And I see the connection, actually. I see that connection right now. You are saying this. I see the connection with your work, actually, the architecture perspective. Because I'm looking at your pictures, because it's easy to go and scroll your photos on Instagram, because that actually it's a nice virtual gallery that you can have all the pictures of Ulberg. I'm gonna call you like this because I like it on one side and understand. But what I notice is that there is this connection with architecture, because everything about hunting is being analyzed. I'm trying to explain a little bit better. Even when you are taking a picture of a rifle, the rifle has a shape, and it is a long shape. I mean, it's more long than wide. Of course, it's like a tube, right? And when you take pictures with the rifle, when the rifle is in your pictures, actually, it's contextualized. So you put that rifle inside. I mean, it could be just put on the wall, or maybe you were hanging the rifle just behind your shoulder, and there is that kind your shape in the middle of this forest. So we see all these lines, actually. The rifle, the vertical rifle, the wall, the forest, and you keep. I mean, you start to see that there is this kind of vertical lines A lot of
Yeah.
pictures have this kind of how you say composition, creation, or patterns, and I think it probably is connected to your architecture mind. I mean, how you process the images in your mind when you create, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I mean, any building you look at, any sort of environment you look at, it will always be anchored to the ground, and the ground will sort of be the starting point where anything is built up from. So if you think about, you know, a house or a big opera house or whatever, you know, office building, could be anything. It's always, it meets the ground one way or the other, and it's the same if you're in the woods, if you're in, and particularly if you're putting a person into that context, then where does it meet the ground, and how does that context unfold around this subject that you're trying to take a photo of? And it's the same with a building. You know, you might be that you're taking photos of details, for example, but always trying to think about the context that you're putting it in. And that's I actually, on Instagram the other day, there was a guy, I was just messaging a guy, and he said, how come all Scandinavians are so good with photography? And I didn't really think of it. I don't think that, well, it's a big generalization, but I think that there might be something to that, in the sense that, you know, that Scandinavian design is quite simple. There's a simplicity to it, and that lends itself very good to photography. And particularly on social media, that the simpler the photo is, the more effective your message comes across.
But it's not easy to achieve. No,
exactly, and that's the hard thing, is to try and trying to make something simple, because it's easier to overcomplicate than oversimplify.
Yeah.
So I think there is something to that. About keeping it simple, keep the composition simple, and try and, you know, silhouettes is a good example, you know, anchoring something to the ground is another good example, looking at shapes like you mentioned as well.
I'm gonna cut yourself again, but this is really strange, because I now remember the podcast that I had with Mountain Rob about cooking your caribou, and I know he's not related to photography, but what he said, and he's a Finnish guy, right? He said, keep it simple. I mean, about the cooking. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Again, we are the same concept. It's amazing. This is just amazing. Because we're talking about cooking, we're talking about photography now. But actually they are, I mean, you can communicate what you want even on cooking.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. And in photography, you're trying to
absolutely
to show what kind of message you wanted to bring to the people. And he said, keep it simple. You say the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So keep it simple. So think about it. It comes back to, you know, analyzing. How can you keep your? How can you? What can you leave out from the scene that you're trying to take a photo of, to keep it as simple as possible, to try and get the same message across.
It's super interesting.
And it's actually an interesting. Yeah, it is, and it's. I think it was Pablo Picasso. He did a drawing exercise where he went through a study of how few lines can I get away with, and you still understand what I'm drawing. You know, can I do it with just one line? Can I do it with two? Like how simple can you keep it? And I think that's an interesting way of working. And it goes to the same, like the first, you know, we're talking about just briefly the first steps into photography, that you instead of just going out and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to take photos of everything, I'm going to take a photo of everything and become really good, then you think, like, can I try and take one photo, and that's all I'm doing today. I'm taking one photo and that's going to be a keeper. And I mean, that's the problem with digital photography, is that you have no constraints. But if you look at film photography, where you had 24 or 36 frames, you had to be really conscious about what you took your photo of. So you had to you really had to think about what you were going through and what you wanted to convey, because now, you know, you have your Sony A7, whereas a 10 shot per second burst speed is like, oh, you don't even need to think about it, you can just shoot. Whereas if you think more consciously about your composition, the simplicity, what you're trying to convey, then it becomes much easier. So but it's a limit. I was just gonna,
in your opinion, it's a limit. I
think that we it's sort of the blank page fallacy if you want to talk about photography in a way that you have so many options, you have so many things to take photo of. You can zoom in as much as you like, you can edit the way you want, but unless you set yourself some limits, you're never gonna get off that first step,
Yeah.
So it's a sort of, you start off with a blank page and you're like, oh, I can do anything with this. But at the end of the day, you end up not doing anything because the options are too many. But if you set down some rules, or not some rules, but if you set down and you think about what do I actually want to achieve? Okay, I want to take a photo of this and this and this. And then instead of trying to chase photos, you're trying to chase the photo.
Yeah.
So it's actually sometimes I do this where I just draw some crude sketches of what I want to take a photo of. There's nothing advanced, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be anything really elaborate, but it's just to get my mind going and think, okay, what am I trying to convey with this? What do I want to achieve, and what do I want to...
It's like your own guideline.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, like a storyboard, essentially, with film.
Yeah, it's sort of... Probably you prepare your mind for when you're going to be in the field or whatever you are going to work with.
And one reason to try and keep these sketches as simple as possible is that if you make it too advanced, you're never ever going to reach that. But if you say, I want something like this, it doesn't have to be exactly this, but something similar to this, you might be able to achieve it. But if you go into way too much detail, it's like, the light needs to be like this, and you make it too constrained, then it's going to be hard to achieve that. But putting some constraints on you is a good thing, and I think that help you. If you're thinking to yourself, I can't take photos as well as this guy or that guy, or not, I think that's bullshit, really. I think that anyone can take good photos because it's a skill like anything else. If you think about it, we didn't know how to speak when we were little, but we've learned that. We've learned how to walk, so we can do it. But I think if you work consciously towards what you're trying to achieve, so set yourself some limits. Try and focus, be deliberate with what you're doing. That will help you sort of overcome difficulties and temporary limits that you might, photographer's block, writer's block, if you like.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember when you mentioned about the films that I remember when I was working with that, and there's a lot of time ago, and you were waiting for that day, when you bring to the studio for you bring your film, and then you're gonna just wait like 1 week, or depending on the studio. Yeah. And then you're thinking like, oh, I hope that shot, will be nice, and it's not gonna be like overexposed, and what I remember is that you have to remember exactly how did you take that shot, because otherwise you will never learn. You will continue to do the same mistake and again and again, and that it's a limit, because today probably, if I have to be honest, I don't remember even sometimes which are the specs of my photography when I start to shoot, on and on. And I have an aperture that is my priority when I work, but it's the limit about these big memory cards, and then you can take tons of shots. But if you don't limit yourself, as you said, actually you're not gonna have any evolution. Yeah, because you're not gonna learn. You're not gonna pass to the next step. And what do you think about this? Is another limitation probably. What do you think about when we post pictures on Instagram? Like, do we have other limits that are connected to the way how the pictures are posted?
Yeah, it's sort of what we touched on earlier with simplicity. That comes back to social media, that you have, because the screen is so small, there's really not that much, or relatively speaking, so small, there's not much room to make the images too complex. And because our attention span has gone down from like, I don't know, 12 seconds like 10 years ago to 8 seconds today, you need, you know, to have your images more simple to be able to communicate your message more effectively, because if not, you just scroll past it. And another thing as well, because Instagram, you know, to use that as an example, it started off as a square format, so you were limited to that, which is good in a way, that if you want to evolve as a photographer, because then you know these are the rules. But because they're now allowed for landscape or like other formats, so both portrait and landscape, it lends itself more to portrait shooting, because that will take up a larger portion of your screen, so it'll be easier to process the image that you're posting, unless you go through the swipe perspectives, which are really quite effective if they're done right, in my opinion. I haven't nailed that just yet, but I have some hopes that I can one day. But I think they exactly. But that's one thing on my list, to actually think of a good image that I can take in that way to try and communicate effectively. I just don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. But that's a limit, because you might have the best landscape shot in the world that will lend itself really well in a big print on the wall, but when you post it on social media, it becomes just so muddled, and you can't really make out the details that you could see in it. So I think that you're limited to the portrait format to be as effective in your communication as possible, but actually, once you start to get comfortable with that, it's worth then trying to take some landscape photos, and then trying to challenge yourself in that way, because you've constrained yourself, you put a straitjacket on yourself with a format through social media, and I think it can be both good and bad in that sense, that you get bigger photos, but then again you can also, if you then plateau in terms of your creativity, it's hard to get beyond that, because you lock yourself into that format. So it's then worth reverting back to different types of formats again.
Yeah, push the artist probably to find different ways, and that could be interesting, because you can reach different ways, learn other types of communication, and so that it's interesting. It could be a limit sometimes, because you want to express yourself in a different way. But I have to say that because again you limit yourself. You want to say that how can you go through that process? It could allow you to achieve some goals. And I found that stressful sometimes, but at the end of it, push your mind to say, I want to find a way. I want to put this kind of shot. I really want that people see this shot like I have in my mind, right? And that's super interesting.
But do you, a question, do you print a lot of your photos? Or do you keep them digitally? I
had a period, and actually when I was in my peak of wildlife photography, I sold a lot of pictures worldwide, and then I still collaborate with the studio. They print my pictures when there is someone that want to buy a print, and then I did some galleries, not so many, because I found out they are so stressful. There is always a problem of funding, and the money is a huge thing, because the last one that I did was in Berlin. I have to print everything by myself, put all the money in the prints, and there were huge prints, like 2 meters by 3, something like that, and then that costs a lot of money, because it's printed on a fine art papers. So I have to find,
and it needs to be on like the backing as well, so you can put it on the wall.
Exactly. So, but it was with another photographer, that is another French photographer. We worked together a while, and it was good, because I learned a lot of things. It was kind of really he's still an experienced photographer. So I printed a lot during that period. Now I have to say, just if there is someone is interested in having a print We go through the lab, I mean the studio, and we print it and send it and ship it. I think that digital, there's another limit today. It's nice when you have the screen, you can analyze a lot of pictures, but when you have a pictures that is hanging on a wall, it's a totally different thing.
It is, and that's why I don't think I've printed any photos. I know some that I've taken on holidays and stuff, and none of my hunting photos. But I think that something that, you know, can be really quite useful sometimes, just to get it out and seeing it in your hand, because you become a bit blind when you're just looking at the screen and you're just consuming, through the screen. So that could also be a good way to sort of look back when you. Or like to take a step back and look at what you've done so far and how you can improve on this, for example, or look at what you're happy with. So
and I think we're probably going to talk about architecture right now. If we're going to think that how you could probably change a house with pictures, you completely could change a wall or just an interior with pictures. And then that sometimes I think that photography has so much power and could be seen today as a trophy. A trophy, because it can tell so many things, probably more than just, I don't want to say that the skull doesn't bring back to really powerful memories, but an European mount or an animal, I don't know, sometimes I think it's limited compared to a really, really deep picture.
I think, I mean, with what you're trying to capture with a photo is the experience that you're having. And if you go out with that as that's the goal that you set yourself before you take the photo, then I think then you're going to value that more than if you just take a trophy photo, or if you bring, like you said, a skull home or something like that. It's a different approach, and I think to go back to why I started taking photos, that was my goal, to try and to try and document that part of it as well.
Yeah, the best could be like you have an European mount. I love the European mount, and a picture.
Yeah, exactly.
That could be nice, because you can
put it on the back.
Yeah. You can live a little bit both if you are someone, you are a stranger, someone who was not there at that moment. And let's get back a little bit. And this is a really, really probably is an annoying question, but I want to see what you think about it. You talk about equipment a little bit at the beginning. And you switch to your phone, and so how much the equipment, I mean, how important is the equipment today? Because I always, especially during my wildlife photography, I train so much in semi-captivities areas to understand how to portrait an animal. And then what I remember is like people, passing, I remember this kind of things in Germany, and I was taking pictures of a wolf. And I could spend like probably 6 hours, just on an animal in front of me, and say like, with an equipment like that, it's normal you take a good shot. Then I say, well, okay, I feel like so small. I said, so that means that if I'm gonna get a good shot, it's just because I invested some money. So what do you think about that? It's just about the equipment?
I mean, so I get a lot of questions, like people who are starting out with photography. It's like, what equipment do you use? And I think it's a bit, of course, it's you need to be able to take a photo, but then you have to ask yourself, what type of photos do you want to take, and what kind of photos are you at the moment capable of taking? Like, what's the message you? What can you convey? And I think that actually, going back to what we were talking about earlier about your phone, it's pretty damn good these days. You can do a lot of stuff with an iPhone. An iPhone 11, the chip is amazing. You have more than enough detail to take photos for social media, for example, and for smallish prints. And I think there is a bit of a cliche with the best camera you have is it's the best camera you have is the one that you bring with you, and your phone is something that you always bring with you. So I think, if I use a Sony A7, and it's a professional camera. A lot of people use it for weddings, and it has endless capabilities. You can take bursts here and there, and you can record 4K video. Has a stabilized sensor, full frame, blah blah blah, all of this stuff. But there's no point recommending that to someone who doesn't really know how to utilize it. So, in other words, there's no point buying a Ferrari if you're going to drive it like a Fiat. Like your phone is capable of a lot of things these days. But I think if you want to sort of transition from your phone into using a camera, I would suggest getting a small mirrorless camera with an APS-C sensor, so like a Sony A6000 or something like that, and either with a standard lens or with either 35mm equivalent or a 50mm equivalent 1.8. That will take you a long way, and I think with that you'll be able to achieve what you can see that other more professional photographers can achieve, like depth of field, etc., and you can take photos in low light. And the cameras these days, mirrorless cameras, don't go for a DSLR. That's the worst thing you can do. They're too big, too bulky. But the mirrorless cameras, they're very small, and the lenses with the APS-C cameras, so the smaller sensors, the lenses also become smaller. So it's a small package. It's easy to carry with you. It makes your life easy, and they're not too advanced, but you can stretch your legs a bit with it, more than you can with your phone. And I think, you can also, so that's sort of the more geeky technical side of what you can do with your equipment. But I think a bigger part that might be ignored is actually in editing, which is often overlooked. And you get your VSCO or you just use the Instagram filters or whatever, to the standard filters to edit your photos, but there is something to finding your own look and your own style. Like, what type of message do you want to convey? Like, gloomy nights, or is it sort of a bright, airy photos? Do you want the colors to pop, or do you want it to be more muted, etc.? And that's a very conscious decision as well. That's something that will help you convey an atmosphere through your photos. And I use Lightroom, I think, and I use different filters for different scenarios. I haven't really done so much black and white yet, but I would like to, and particularly for prints, because I think they're quite powerful, powerful images. And that's also another way to challenge yourself, to just focus on black and white photos. But that's another discussion again. But I think looking into editing photos, learning how to edit photos, that's also another important part of it, because it just helps your photos pop, and it helps you, it just brings them to life, really, because straight out of camera or through a phone, they might look a bit flat, but once you start editing with the curves and just editing the contrast a bit, they might just all of a sudden come to life. And it also becomes another stylistic decision from your part on the photo. You put your sort of watermark on it, I guess.
Yeah, I think, you just gave a lot of good information, helpful information about how, today it's just like the equipment is not just the camera, because like the dark room now, it's your computer.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I spend a lot of time on Lightroom on my...
I'm the same, yeah. And I think it's today what I found out is like I spend time in the outdoors. I probably want to catch this in the moment, but I really like when you are back at home and you are watching your pictures on the computer and trying to work on the pictures. You're quiet, you're relaxing, chilling out. I sometimes put a little bit of music, and then I work on the pictures. Now I can create, because it's a dark room. And I found out sometimes people say, but that is like editing, it's like a photoshopping. No, I don't think it. I don't think it's photoshopping a picture, because before there was a different process in darkroom, but you can achieve different things. You can add the contrast, you can blur some areas. Today, of course, it's a lot more easier than before, but it's not really like it's not something that you can just in 2-3 hours and you can deal 100% with the entire process. It's I found out that you need time. You need time to understand what you want to say, how your pictures work with the editing, because it depends how you take your pictures in the field. You cannot make the same editing if your pictures, your data actually is collected in a wrong way, or probably not in the way that you want. And I found out that in front of the computer, that's just like, that's the moment. That's really the moment you create your own universe with photography. It's just amazing.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's really interesting in that whole topic, like editing and you could, Photoshop and all of that. But I really think that that's a crucial part of it. Like it makes it, that's where you can actually sort of add the final 10 or 20% to your photo. I mean, if you want to look at it as a whole, you cannot edit your way out of composition. You cannot edit, or you cannot buy any equipment that will make you circumvent composition. You cannot
it's just
buy
amazing
any of that.
What you're saying, because that's probably is the key in photography. Just what you say. It's without that, there's no photo.
Yeah, we can talk about. I'll just touch on that briefly, but there's sort of the editing. It's always that's the seasoning, if you like to use a food analogy, on your dish. And you cannot season your way out of a badly cooked dish. So you need your composition to be able to do that properly. But I think you can with editing, when you do your color corrections, when you do your lights, your darks, etc., you can kind of steer the photo or the message or whatever the story you're trying to tell into a certain direction, and that becomes a stylistic choice, very much so. And I think it's in a similar way to back in the day, you used to buy different types of film, that had different properties, and when you had different processing, you processed the film in different ways to achieve different things. So it's essentially the same way, but now you just have more control of all the different points in that process. So it's not left to chance. But in terms of taking a step back again and talk about composition, I think that's the starting point with anything, and that's like I was touching on the little sketches or doodles, if you'd like, that I like to draw sometimes. It's about trying to find an interesting composition that is pleasing and that conveys the message that you're trying to say. And you can sort of get all theoretical and starts with rule of thirds, and you can do center focus, like we talked about Wes Anderson. He used to like to place things right in the middle, and that becomes like in a usual sort of baroque way. But or you can do golden section, where you sort of put more emphasis on certain parts and you let it swirl through, or use leading lines through the photos, like for example a river, or like you said, you talk about the rifle, you can think about the rifle sling, how that kind of could lead you through a photo or something like that. But I think those things, they always need to come first before you get to the editing. So I would argue that editing is a crucial part of it, because that's where you steer the photo after you've taken it in the direction that you want, and you wouldn't be able to take it it's difficult to save a badly composed shot with editing, but all of it, they sort of go hand in hand, and they're required to get it as good as it can be, I think.
You can crop sometimes when there is some kind of imperfection, or probably happened to me that I don't want, there is some information in the pictures that I don't want in that moment when I'm editing, and then I crop. But that happened at the beginning. Now it's it's really interesting that what I crop a lot probably in the beginning when I always do wildlife photography, because I want to put the focus on the animal. When now what is happening when I go back to check those pictures, I say, oh, it's cropped like that. I want I delete. I mean that the cropping effect. And I see we have to see more. We have to contextualize the animal. That's you see the different approach. But now you make me think about something because you're talking about composition, and then I don't know if you remember. I don't know the photographer right now because my memory is it's like a redfish. It's not good. But anyway, do you remember that picture that was posted in the Sitke? Profile some days ago, right? Or 1 week ago.
The first on the new catalog. Yeah.
The new autumn catalog, right? There's that guy in the grass wearing subalpine, and there is a Helk, I think, if I don't mistake. A Helk on. So, and then when you have a pictures like this, you actually don't need any caption.
No,
it's done.
No, you're right.
It's done by the. I mean, everything is it's explained. I mean, explained. It's there is a story there. It's like one scene of a comic.
Yeah,
it's a story.
Exactly. It's like you don't really need anything to describe exactly what's going on.
No.
And exactly sort of what we were talking about earlier. I mean, what a lot of people would, or what you would be tempted to do is focus on the animal, but actually what's interesting here is not the animal in the background or putting the animal in the foreground and making that the subject of a photo, but it's more interesting to see the reaction of the hunter. Like he knows, and you can see that through the photos, the look on his face, everything. You could just see like this guy, he knows that he's in a sticky situation that he's not going to get out of. You can just see it.
So much powerful. And, it's every detail is so powerful.
It's amazing.
And you lose yourself.
It's
actually.
Amazing.
Well, imagine to have that kind of printed, like in a big format, in a big frame, just hanging on a wall. You can just stay like 15 minutes, more than that, whatever you want to spend. But you're gonna just contemplate that things. Like even that the guy is not looking to the hell. He's looking to the right side. It's like it brings you back when you share one of those moments, Then you are like that, trying to bring your nature back to the primal status, that trying to be that predator that you were before. But whatever technology you brought up, I mean, the Helk, it's on another level, man, because it's gonna ask you a lot of effort to get close, or really a close distance.
I mean, when I saw that photo, I was like, this is unbelievable. This is like, it's so good, so powerful. And it kind of, I guess it really ties the knot with what we've been, talking about previously. Like, it's about, or to me at least, it's about putting people into a context and focusing on people dealing, with nature and in terms of hunting. And I think that photo is sort of, I wish I took it myself, but... But it's cool to see someone, and it sort of pushes you like, oh wow, this is really cool, really cool.
It's amazing.
And I think, I mean, it is hard to take photos, and particularly when you're hunting by yourself, because it's difficult to take photos of yourself in a sort of context without going for like the selfie, But I think one thing that in terms of composition is good to keep in mind is, whenever you take a photo, you always sort of take it, you put your phone up or your camera or whatever, and you just take it. One way to think of it is, you lift your camera up to get a different perspective, or you put it lower down to get a different perspective again. But another one that I find really useful is actually if you just stand where you stood and not take a photo of that, but take a step back, to try and sort of place the camera in an odd angle to what you were and that can often change the dynamic of your photo. And I think that obviously they've had professional photographers to take this photo of the elk, but it sort of goes to show, if you sort of, instead of standing too close to the subject, which is the person in the foreground, you just kind of stay a bit back, and you try and include both of the elements in the photo.
And even the aperture is something that we are probably the today, you want to achieve this kind of bokeh effect, and so the aperture is wide open. And then doing a picture like that, you have to be really, really careful about how you're using the aperture, because otherwise your health is going to be completely blurry. You cannot even understand what it is. So this big that for that reason that picture is always it's really strike for that reason. And what I always thought about the photography is that you gonna tell something that probably someone already have lived that moment, have lived that kind of situation, you know. So I always do this kind of example to me. I don't know why I create this example. It was a long time ago. Someone asked me something about photography. And I say, if you keep your camera at your eye level.
Yeah.
And you, for example, let's imagine that you get into a classroom, right? So you can see at the bottom, there is the teachers, you know, the desk and the students, right? So you're going to enter in this room with the camera at your eye level. So I don't know, I'm 1.70 m, 1.80 m.
Yeah.
And you get in and you start to shot. And what you're gonna show to people? Something that you already know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my daughter's being the savage. And they're just calling me. Yeah.
They just had enough.
So I don't know what is happening.
That's all right.
Come here 1 second. Anyway, this is the live. This is the live. Anyway, what is happening? You're naked.
That's enough,
You're naked. What are you doing here? Oh, give me 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and I will be back. Say hi to everyone. Say hi. Hi, everyone. Okay, good.
Hi.
Can you give me 10 minutes? I will be back. We'll go swimming pool. Okay. Bye. See you. Okay, I have to put some blur on. I don't know if the camera will see that. She's completely naked. Oh my god. Oh, sorry guys. Sorry.
That's the life of a toddler.
And this is when you have kids, guys. And then we love wildlife. This is wildlife in the house. So, so to go back to that example. So imagine to go step back, and you have to get in that room, and you put the camera at the height of your feet, and you get in that classroom. You're not going to see the teacher. You're probably going to see her feet. You're going to see all the feet of the desk, the different shoes of the students, how they are, the posture. And then you're getting in that classroom. What is going to give you a lot different information, something that you're not used to see. And then it's completely another story, because how many enter a classroom like a snake, crawling?
Yeah.
Not many people. But it's a different perspective, and that the same things happen in hunting.
Exactly. And I think if you then, once you started talking about this, I was just, it made me think of Wes Anderson again, because you can imagine, a classroom where you have the desks, they set up in like a grid formation, well, there's sort of set up and facing the blackboard at the end. And if you walk through any, a classroom, which is like an environment that like you said, you will always view it from a perspective. You will always see it from the same from your eye height, as you pointed out. But if you then sort of try and align things, so let's say that we put the camera in the center, or if you put it like just perpendicular to the desks, you will see a completely different thing. And using that analogy, you can anything as can you call it as normal and sort of everyday like as a classroom, you can do a lot of things with it. And it's the same with hunting. Put your camera up, take a photo straight down, put it down to the ground. Try and when you're out hunting, if you're hunting with someone, try and tell them, oh no, stand a bit higher, because then you can see your silhouette over there, instead of you're standing right in front of a lot of trees and you can't see much. And I think it becomes much more powerful the way you convey things if you sort of take control of that. Yeah. And if you consciously think of how you can take control of that.
Yeah. So at the end, to finish this amazing speech that we have with you, and I'm really happy that I got you on the podcast, because it's a really nice view of the photography that you share with us. So at the end, you think that art, in this case photography, is a language, is a type of language? It would.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's sort of. I think it's a really difficult question because it sort of is and it isn't. It's a way of in one way it's a way of conveying information. You know, you can take a photo of a piece of paper and send it to someone. Oh, I saw this today, for example, or you can sort of stretch it the other way and try and convey a feeling, or use it, you know, to create art with it. I remember I saw an exhibition through. There's a really good photography gallery in Stockholm called Fotografiska, and there was an exhibition, I think it was last year, where there was a photographer. She built up her compositions more or less like a Baroque painting, and she built up the scene with smoke, and like the model was standing in a certain way and the lighting and stuff, and then she took a photo of it. So if you think about it, you know, in terms of, it's basically the opposite of a painting where you build up everything, and then you take the photo at the end, instead of starting painting and then you kind of trail off with it. But it's a similar process, but you're using a camera as your paintbrush, and I think that becomes, if you think of it that way, yes, very much so as an art form. And I think if you want to convey, you know, your hunting experiences, yes, it absolutely is, because you're trying to get someone into your shoes, and trying to convey what the experience, or your experience at that point in time, which is hard, and art is not meant to be easy. So but absolutely, yes.
It's like learning a language, actually, a real language. So it's vocabulary, and I think vocabulary today for photography is like how to use the light, because that is photography. It's just writing with light.
Yep.
So if you know how to use the different lights of the different periods, the different times of day, actually it will bring you to good achievement. And then to feel free that you can communicate what really you want. It demands time. It demands a lot of time, because you can learn everything fast, like just in 1 or 2 weeks. And I think one of the best things that probably what I say to people that ask me what you want to suggesting is like, try to experiment with whatever you can. Just don't focus on the specs of your camera. And sometimes I don't even know how much shutter speed I have on my camera. I don't even know the specs of my camera, and because this is not my, I don't. This is not important for me. And sometimes I remember this appear that I could not even achieve a picture that I liked. It was like all my pictures were blur, and I said, yes, I love it. I love it, because that was the real message I wanted. And then said, I went to Norway to just take pictures of muskox, and then I took a Tamron 200mm that was way different. The quality was a lot different from the 500mm of Canon that I had. This is a huge gap. But I say I don't want a sharp picture. So every picture was a black and white, and the muskox looked like, this kind of shapes on the horizon, and I love it. This was what I want to communicate. So
exactly. Making a conscious decision about it, that's something. And instead of focusing on there's a lot of talk about equipment, and I think it can provide to be a guideline, but that's about it, really. Once you start focusing on the specs, then you should sort of say, hey, this is let's take a step back and
the experiment. Experiment is something that actually it's so much important in art, I think. Really.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a final comment. I guess it would be if I learned one piece of advice before I started with photography when I was 18 years old, would be shoot with purpose. That's one thing. Like, be conscious with what you're doing, and be conscious with what you're trying to take a photograph of. If not, you're just going to drown in all of these pictures that are not going to be quite as good as you hoped, and you're going to ultimately end up being disappointed.
Yes.
So just trying to think about what you want to try and take a photo of, and and that will help you a very, very, very long way.
Oh, that's a good point. That's an amazing point. So good. We reached. Wow, that was fast. 1 hour, and wow, it's to me it looks like 2 minutes. That was so fast, and then I really enjoyed. So nice, really, really good. I hope a lot of people.
It's such a big topic, and it's difficult to cover it, and it's difficult also to cover it with because it's a graphical topic. But hopefully, it can provide some sort of information to someone.
And I hope that the viewers will enjoy it, and listeners. And who knows that we're gonna have a part 2 in the next future with Ulberg. And for the moment, thank you so much, Kristian. And
thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for us and for me. We're gonna put the link in the description. Okay, so you guys can go and check the Ulberg profile, the blog, and have a good experience with these creations, because I think they're really a huge inspiration, especially for people that want to start this kind of outdoor photography today. It's a good guide to check out. Good. Thank you, Ulberg. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.